The Right to Sex, Feminism in the 21st Century. This book was written by Amia Srinivasan and published by Farrar, Straus and Giroux. This sharp 4 books analysis of the right to sex will highlight the ways we discuss and avoid discussing the problems of politics and sex. Since the Me Too movement, many have been fixed on consent as the key framework for achieving sexual justice, but consent is just a blunt tool. The analysis will offer us a glimpse of sex in all its complexity, its deep ambivalences and relationship to gender, class, race and power, affirming that it is time to move beyond yes and no, wanted and unwanted. Before we take on the full analysis, let's find out a little something about the author. Amia Srinivasan was born in Bahrain and has lived in Taiwan, Singapore, New York and London. She studied at Yale University, graduating with a Bachelor of Arts, BA degree in philosophy. This was followed by postgraduate Bachelor of Philosophy, B.Phil, and Doctor of Philosophy, D.Phil degrees as a Rhodes Scholar at Corpus Christi College, University of Oxford. In 2015, she was appointed Lecturer in Philosophy at University College London, UCL. She was an Associate Professor at the University of Oxford from 2018 to 2019 and is an Associate Editor of the philosophy journal Mind and a contributing editor of the London Review of Books. The collection of essays dedicated to sex and feminism, The Right to Sex, published in 2021, is her first book. And now it's time for our analysis of The Right to Sex, starting with the author's explanation of an important premise. Sex is linked to culture when it pretends to be linked to nature. Our sex, which is supposedly a natural thing, is already laden with meaning from the moment we are born. At birth, bodies are sorted into 2 categories, male or female, and this division determines what social purpose a body will be assigned. Some of these bodies are for giving life, giving pleasure, and providing nourishment to other bodies, for making them feel good and whole and in control. So sex is actually a cultural thing posing as a natural one. The word sex in the second sense is also said to be a natural thing, an act that we perform with our bodies. And even here, everything is predefined. Some bodies must give pleasure, serve and confirm the value of other bodies. This act is said to exist outside politics, but feminism believes that this is also fiction, one that serves particular interests. Feminism, a political movement that aims to transform the world beyond recognition, exposes the inconsistencies and fictions that surround the way we view sex. Feminism begins with a woman's recognition that she is a member of a sex class. That is, a member of a class of people assigned to an inferior social status based on something called sex, a thing that is said to be natural, pre-political, objective material ground on which the world of human culture is built. Therefore, it cannot be said that sex is disconnected from politics and that it is objective terrain, since it is already charged with meaning. Sexual assault and its representation in our culture. There are cases where a man is accused of a sexual assault he didn't commit. There are many more cases of women who have never reported incidences of assault. So how do we explain this discrepancy? The most detailed ever study carried out by the UK Home Office in 2005 estimated that just 3% of 2,643 of rape reports made over 15 years may be false. However, for that same period, the police reported 8% of these claims were believed to be false, based on personal judgment. In the United States, the situation is similar. It is evident, therefore, that police officers are susceptible to the myth of rape and tend to consider a report false if there are no signs of physical struggle, if the attacker was not in possession of a weapon, or if the accuser had a prior relationship with the accused. False accusations can ruin the life of an honest man, but the life of a woman who has been subjected to violence and who is not believed becomes hell too. In the common imagination, it is women who unjustly accuse a man of violence he did not commit, but in reality, the false accusations mostly come from other men. In the United States, for example, black men make up 14% of the US male populations and 27% of the population convicted of rape. It can therefore be argued that there is a kind of conspiracy against certain groups of men. A black man who is in prison for rape is 3.5 times more likely to be innocent than a white man. Furthermore, another aspect that contributes to discrimination is poverty. Most Americans who find themselves in prison, regardless of their race, are poor. Porn as an instrument of patriarchy and exercise of freedom of expression. Pornography is no longer the taboo subject it used to be, since the internet has established it as a part of normal life. Years ago, there might have been talk of abolishing porn when there were only videotapes and magazines available, but nowadays it would seem that porn is here to stay. For early generation feminists, porn is what they would call problematic sex in general, since the sex featured doesn't take into account female pleasure and often involves prostitution or sex without love. The second generation of feminists began protesting against pornography in the 1960s. In the mid-1970s, they began to see porn as the cornerstone of patriarchy, and in 1976, the first anti-pornography group, Women Against Violence in Pornography and Media, was founded. Feminists of this period viewed porn as propaganda, as the very skeleton of patriarchal ideology. In their fight against porn, feminists lost perspective because they assigned it too much power. But what if they had seen a perspective that others were not able to grasp? Perhaps pornography isn't just a depiction of female subordination so much as an act which in itself subordinates women. The psyche of today's students is shaped by pornography, and to educate young people about sex is not enough to counteract the effects of the sexual images they see online. For example, some studies show that men who watch pornography are less likely to take action in support of women. But it is difficult to measure the effects porn has on ideology, although in some cases it is clear that habitual users of the genre often hold it as the standard and may judge a real-life partner by that standard. Involuntary celibate Elliot Rodger and the Isla Vista Massacre. Elliot Rodger, a British-born student at Santa Barbara City College, considered himself an incel, an involuntary celibate. He believed that women were the cause of his problems and frustrations, as they gave affection and love to other men, but not to him. At the age of 22, he was still a virgin. One morning in May 2014, he entered his apartment and stabbed his 2 roommates and another boy who happened to be there, then got into his car and drove away. He uploaded a video to his YouTube channel and sent several people, including his parents and his therapist, an email containing his manifesto, entitled My Twisted World. He made his way to the Alpha Phi sorority house where he shot 3 women, killing 2 of them. He then went on a drive-by shooting spree through Santa Barbara, shooting passers-by. Eventually, he took his own life by shooting himself in the head. The overall toll was 7 dead, including the killer, and 14 wounded. Rodger had grown up in the United Kingdom and had had a happy childhood, but his adolescence in Los Angeles was unhappy and he felt very much alone. He'd always wanted to be liked, but he was a short, shy boy who didn't have any success with girls. As he grew older, he grew irritated by other people's sex lives, wondering why some kids were more popular than him. He referred specifically to black kids and couldn't understand why they had better social lives than him, since he was descended from British aristocracy. His opinions gradually became radical, up to the point where he decided to commit murder. The incels blame women and feminism for the Rodger massacre. In the Manosphere, a collection of websites, blogs, and online forums promoting masculinity, misogyny, and opposition to feminism, the incels, involuntary celibates, began to talk about the murders committed by Rodger, blaming women and feminism for his acts of violence. They said that if one of the women he liked had had sex with him, he wouldn't have had to kill all those people. Feminists responded that no woman was obligated to have sex with Rodger, and that the patriarchal value system had determined the young man's beliefs. In his manifesto, Rodger wrote about the bullying that he had been subjected to, yet he was convinced that the root of his problems came from the fact that women had deprived him of sex. The author suggests that feminism could have been the key to fighting the system that had made Rodger feel inadequate, as he was short, of mixed race, and effeminate. After all, the women Rodger desired were blonde and attractive, and adhered to the aesthetic set by the patriarchy, stereotypes of which he himself had been a victim. Perhaps the main reason that women were not attracted to him was because they themselves had internalized patriarchal norms of male attractiveness. There is no such thing as a right to sex. Looking back on Rodger's story, the author explores the issue of desire and sex, and the reactions of feminists to the events that took place in Santa Barbara. Many of them believe that Rodger was the embodiment of misogynistic conceit, and in particular of the violence showing complete disregard for right and wrong. The author finds it strange, however, that public opinion overlooked the fact that whilst Rodger claimed to have been pushed aside because he did not respond to the stereotypes of masculinity, he himself held women up to the same impossible standard. At this point, it is important to underline that racism and heterosexual norms settle in people's minds, taking root and taking shape through the filter of our personal preferences. Another important consideration is that there is no such thing as a right to sex. To think along those lines would pave the way for a justification of sexual violence. However, social conventions, racism, classism, and heteronormative thinking structure our world and our general mindset, setting the standards for who is and is not worthy of being called attractive. Furthermore, politics shapes sexual desire, as we can easily see how some men erroneously believe that they have the right to sex and can exercise it even through coercion. Discouraging and prohibiting sexual relationships between teachers and students. As a result of some feminist campaigns against sexual assaults during the 1980s, US universities began to discourage and prohibit relationships between teachers and students. In 1992, Jane Gallup, a professor at the University of Wisconsin, was accused of sexually assaulting 2 of her female students. She received a reprimand for having violated the regulation that prevented romantic relationships between teachers and students. Years later, in the book she wrote in her defense, Gallup argued that the pedagogical relationship is a consensual love relationship in which there is a strong erotic charge. If professors and students are prevented from having loving and sexual relationships, therefore, the pedagogical potential is limited. Gallup quoted Freud stating that a transfer takes place in the teacher-student relationship just as it does in the patient's relationship with their analyst. The student projects onto the teacher the feelings that the patient projects onto the therapist, and therefore, consequently, a pedagogical relationship that takes on physical overtones can be considered successful. And that brings us to the end of our summary. If you would like to know more about any of the points raised in The Right to Sex, why not read the book? Here are a few quotes we have selected to give you a quick preview. Feminism is not a philosophy or a theory or even a point of view. It is a political movement to transform the world beyond recognition. Sex, which we think of as the most private of acts, is in reality a public thing. The roles we play, the emotions we feel, who gives, who takes, who demands, who serves, who wants, who is wanted, who benefits, who suffers. The rules for all this were set long before we entered the world. Porn is not pedagogy, yet it often functions as if it were. But a feminist politics which sees the punishment of bad men as its primary purpose will never be a feminism that liberates all women, for it obscures what makes most women unfree. Finally, let's close with 4books' take-home message from the book. Feminism in the 21st century can change the way we discuss the issues and political choices related to sex. The sexual act, which seems so private to us, is actually a very public matter, since it depends on many social and cultural factors. Sex and sexual attraction are personal preferences shaped by outside forces. To fully grasp this concept in all its complexity and ambivalence, we need to carefully consider the implications of gender, class, race, and power.